Computers are things that seem to be taking up a lot of our time these days. Well, they certainly do mine. They've become very important to us in many ways, but they can have a downside and can also be bad for our social life and become more of a distraction rather than any creative use we could put them to. Also, the obsession with style and brand names created through heavy marketing creates the notion that the latest model and its high tech is more important than what the actual machine can do or what it can be used for. In this programme we're going to look at some of the creative uses for computers through what is called open source, of which this series takes its name, and looking at why we don't need to spend a fortune on computers and software if we run open source programmes on our machines. Hopefully the listener will learn enough here to pique their interest and to find out a bit more. Don't worry if you don't get it at first. It's a bit mind-boggling, especially if you know nothing about computers. But we'll try not to get bogged down in geek-speak and techie talk. Well, maybe a little bit. My knowledge is kind of limited in computers. I'm more interested in, like others, in what happens in the web page, rather than in how it manages to magically appear on the screen. But I know enough about open source technology to understand how important it is, and also in the potential for its use. And the really great thing about it is open source things are free. There is a bit of practice involved in learning how to use it, but the rewards are many. There is also a great open source supportive community to help out along the way from beginners to advanced. Just so we understand a few things before we start, computer code is what is used to build programs and operating systems. An operating system is what makes your computer work, and programs are what allow us to do things like graphics and music editing. This is known as software. What you see on the screen, the information you surf the web for, images, music, text and so on, this is called content. The operating system and the programs are separate from content. These things work in the background on our computer to organise and generate what you see on the screen, whatever that might be. So we have to remember these are two separate things. The content is what we get on the screen, text, images, films and so on. And what's known as the operating system and the programs is the vehicle that delivers this information and works away in the background unseen. What is used to build these operating programs is known as computer code, which is what we are interested in here. The term open source means that the code that makes computers operate and do what they do. In open source, this code is free and open to anybody. Roughly speaking, you can get into your computer code and design it to do what you want it to do. The opposite is spending money on a commercial program you buy out the shop, which is as good as it gets until you have to shell out more money when the company that manufactures the program gets round to updating it. It would be useful to mention here too that computer software needs constant updating to keep it running smoothly. With open source, the software is updated on nearly a daily basis. So when we buy a computer, apart from the cost of the machine and all the other peripherals, that's things like printers and such like, we also have to pay for the programs and the operating system. Then of course, as we probably know, a year or two down the line, we will have to replace a lot of this equipment as the operating system and the programs of various manufacturers are updated. This costs a pile of money, and if we can't afford to update our computer or buy one in the first place, we're stuck. Our computer ends up in a skip. But imagine for a minute if you could take one of these discarded computers that you see in skips all over the place, take it home, replace the operating system with a new one that is open source, maybe one that's called Ubuntu that will run happily on an older computer. With this system you can have the choice of hundreds of programs that you can install which would be constantly updated and improved, and all of this for free. This is the potential of open source in your computer. You have to wonder why we're not all using it already. Part of the reason for that and the reason for this wee programme is a lot of folk have never heard about it. So let's recap. The programs for editing images, music, film and such like, the actual code that is used to build these open source operating systems or programs is free and available for anybody to use, develop and improve. This is the opposite of the type of programs mentioned that we pay for when we buy a computer or we buy off the shelf each time a company brings out a new updated version. So we might ask now, who does this open source? We speak about communities of developers when we talk about open source programming. Many of these communities stretch around the world, as everything can be done online. So there are thousands and thousands of people working in these projects, from simple web applications to things like Wikipedia and OpenStreetMap, both developed using open source computer technology. For instance, the OpenStreetMap project is in the process of building a people's map of the world with a collaboration of hundreds of people from all over the place. The open source community has been around since the invention of computers and in fact are the inventors. The main principle of this community, made up of all manner of people, has been freedom of information. As well as this online activity, there are also meeting places such as the one in Glasgow, the Electron Club. There's the Edinburgh Hack Lab and others in different cities where we can meet up to workshop and discuss open source projects and ideas. People can join these clubs and online communities to help with developing programs and to learn about coding. So let's look at the code. This seems a bit abstract at first. Everything you see on your screen and what happens in your computer is generated by code. The code we talk about that is used to build these programs, which can seem quite mysterious at first. It looks like and is made up of wee piles of dots, dashes, numbers, chevrons, squiggles and brackets. You see it sometimes in your screen when your computer breaks down. We reach this source code in our computer through what's called the command line. That's an interface for interacting with your computer's operating system or software, where we can type in commands to perform specific tasks, when we know what we're doing, of course. This code can be shifted around in various ways to make different things happen, and a collection of these happenings put together is what makes a computer program that could be capable of doing a multitude of things. All these wee dots and dashes make up what are called computer languages. The code is written and used to give instructions. It works much like, say when you write out directions for somebody, getting to 49 Hill Street. Walk to the top of the road, turn left. If there's a 49 bus, get on it and tell the driver to let you off at Hill Street. If there is no bus available, walk half a mile, and when you get to Hill Street, go left up the hill. The address is 49 on the left, etc, etc. That's basically what computer code does. It gives instructions of how to get from A to B, and alternative instructions can be scripted in to deal with things that may happen along the way that could stop you from reaching your destination. It can deal with these simple problems or with massively much more complex problems all at the same time, and of course much faster. Learning code is about like learning to read. When we first do that, the squiggly letters on the page make no sense to us at all and looks really difficult. But when we learn to recognise the patterns of letters and through memorising them, how we can start to use these squiggles to express things and to communicate. Learning to knit code together as we practice, like writing, starts to make sense and can become second nature, just like writing words. We can also test our code on the computer and see what task it performs as we use it and test it to build different scripts. So all that happens in our computer is made to happen by developers and programmers altering code. This decides what you see and what you don't see, what you pay for and what is free on both the internet and on your machine. So learning this computer language can be of benefit in keeping things open, free and participatory. And particularly in the present world where business interests are determined to do the opposite, to put a money value on everything. There is also much in open source for the layperson to get interested in terms of programs, and they're still free. We still have choice in what we use with any kind of operating system. We may already use some open source products in our computers already, such as Firefox, which has become a very popular browser. A browser is a program that allows you to look at the internet. Audacity is an audio editing program that I have used to edit what you're listening to now, which is free. The GIMP is an excellent image manipulation program, and there is OpenOffice, which is a whole set of word processing tools. And there are lots of other programs, all free, easy to use and all open source, that can run on any kind of computer. Let's summarise a bit. So we should be getting the idea now, if I'm making any sense. If not, here are a few more sound reasons why we should be using open source. When we buy a computer, the software installed on it will usually be what is known as proprietary software. That is stuff you have to pay for. Proprietary or closed source software does not let people see or allow them to change the source code of the software. It is the opposite of open source, free software which anyone can change. The operating system that you pay for is a bit like having a Meccano set without the spanners, for those who remember Meccano, or like having a big box of toys when you're only allowed to play with one or two of the toys if you pay up front. Not only does open source give you access to all of the toys in the box, it also supplies you with the tools to build your own toys, and you can invite all your friends to join in the process. The other thing is proprietary software, the stuff you buy, is developed by companies. I'm specifically not mentioning any names. Some of them are giant corporations with thousands of shareholders to please with profits. And when they update their operating system and programs, they have to pay a great many programmers and developers to do the work. This makes the product very expensive. And these proprietary programs tend to install extra things in your computer that you have no need for or didn't ask for, and take up lots more memory on your hard drive than their open source equivalents. This is why you sometimes have to buy a new computer when these companies update their systems, as the memory needed to install each new system increases every time a new operating system or program comes out. So not only are open source operating systems and programs free, they will also work happily installed in older computers. There is no need to upgrade your computer and install lots more memory every 5 minutes when a new operating system comes out. So you can extend the life of your computer with open source and even use other people's discarded computers to install open source operating systems that we could give to other people who maybe can't afford to buy a computer. My particular interest is if our kids are to be given computers at earlier and earlier ages, which incidentally I think is a terrible idea, as young children's development at that stage of their life. It is crucial that they have a variety of experience, people, things, different stimulus, interaction and whatnot. Computers in the hands of young kids is like watching television. It can be passive and zombifying. Computers and the internet are important things that need to be taken seriously, but we need to learn how to use them if they are to be of any use. Otherwise they just become another form of television. Young people who think that they know all this stuff, which maybe they do when it comes to eye-to-hand coordination and using the keyboard, but who are young do not carry the baggage of experience that can help to regulate the use of these technologies. Much of the internet experience as young people is peer-to-peer, devoid of the older generation. This may look like a cool scene for multitudes of teenagers, but overuse of computers as communication and entertainment tools can disconnect them from the process of moving into adulthood, when sometimes the only adults they communicate with are teachers, and time spent with their parents is when they pass in the hall on their way to the computer suite. To be sure, the personal computer hasn't been around long enough that we can judge the real impact it is having on our social lives or society, but it has been around long enough that we should be wary of the effects it is having on our young people, both good and bad. Having said that, imagine that when our kids are given their first computer, what a different experience it could be if they were not limited to the mostly one-way traffic of the internet. If they were given an open source machine and encouraged to develop the machine and software to work for them. This is indeed how many of the high-tech world started out, as hobbyists and simple computers that they learned to convert, modify and program to their specifications, not to mention the money to be saved. Part of the problem with open source is a lack of awareness that it exists. History of the development of information technology through its inventors, practitioners and pioneers is the idea of freedom of information. Unfortunately, much of that freedom still resides in the elite institutions of the university, art schools and further education. But there are developments Ideas that can offer the novice and even the computer denier an opportunity to join in, such as OpenStreetMap, a project that could break through the idea that you always need to be in front of a computer to be involved. OpenStreetMappers, as well as being techno-savvy, get out into the community, talk to people, discover new places and encourage others to join by contributing their unique knowledge of where they live. Many folk get involved in computer technology from other interests, and when they realise the possibilities the computer has to offer in expanding these interests. While we're on the subject, another interesting analogy could be an open source political system, where the tools of democracy are designed by the community for the use of people. Our political system could have much to learn from the open source community in terms of accountability, consensus, communication, participation, sharing, learning, resourcefulness, creativity, ecology, recycling, and much more. But I suppose that's another broadcast.